The war in Ukraine changed global politics overnight. Missiles, tanks, drones, sanctions. And at the center of it all is one country, the United States. Washington has sent tens of billions in aid to Ukraine, weapons, intelligence, financial support. But there's one thing it hasn't sent: American soldiers. Why? If Ukraine matters so much, why not fight directly? Because this isn't just about Ukraine. It's about strategy, escalation, nuclear deterrence, and long-term power balance against Russia. Let's break it down. Officially, the U.S. says it supports Ukrainian sovereignty, international law, territorial integrity. But geopolitics is rarely just about principles. Strategically, this war affects NATO credibility, European security architecture, Russian military power, future deterrence in Asia. If Russia succeeds easily, it signals that force works. If Russia struggles, it weakens Moscow's global leverage. From Washington's perspective, this war shapes the balance of power in Europe for decades. NATO is central to American global strategy. If Ukraine were a NATO member, Article 5 would require collective defense. But Ukraine is not a NATO member. This creates a strategic gray zone. The U.S. wants to support Ukraine strongly, avoid triggering a direct NATO-Russia war. Sending troops would mean direct combat between nuclear powers. That changes everything. Russia possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal. Direct U.S. troop involvement risks escalation beyond conventional war, accidental clashes, miscalculation at high tension. When two nuclear powers fight directly, escalation ladders become extremely dangerous. So Washington calibrates support carefully. Weapons? Yes. Intelligence? Yes. Direct combat? No. This keeps the conflict below the NATO-Russia threshold. The goal is to help Ukraine without crossing red lines. Part 4. The Strategy of Indirect War, 14-18. There's a historical pattern here. Instead of direct war, great powers often fight indirectly. This is called proxy or indirect conflict. From Washington's perspective, supporting Ukraine weakens Russia's military without risking American lives. Russia has lost equipment, lost troops, spent enormous financial resources, burned diplomatic capital, and the U.S. has done so without deploying divisions. Strategically, that's efficient power competition. It reduces a rival's capacity at lower cost. After Iraq and Afghanistan, American public appetite for large ground wars is limited. Deploying troops into Ukraine would mean potential casualties, long-term occupation risk, massive spending, political backlash. Presidents must calculate domestic tolerance. Military aid is politically easier to sustain than body bags. Public support can weaken quickly if American soldiers are directly involved. So Washington balances moral messaging with political feasibility. This is not just America's war. Europe is directly affected. If Russia expands aggression, Eastern Europe becomes unstable. The U.S. strategy includes pushing Europe to increase defense spending, reduce energy dependency on Russia, strengthen NATO coordination. Sending American troops could allow Europe to remain passive. Instead, Washington shares responsibility. This strengthens alliance cohesion long-term. Part 7. Why not end the war? Quickly, 26-29. Some argue the U.S. should push Ukraine toward quick negotiations, but from a strategic standpoint, a premature settlement that rewards aggression may weaken deterrence. Washington wants Ukraine strong enough to negotiate Russia unable to claim clear victory. The objective isn't endless war. It's a negotiated outcome from a position of strength. Direct U.S. involvement could remove Ukraine's agency and escalate the stakes dramatically. Everything in Washington is viewed through one lens: China. If the U.S. sends troops to Ukraine, it risks dividing focus, stretching resources, signaling overcommitment. Meanwhile, the Indo-Pacific remains the primary long-term strategic theater. Avoiding troop deployment keeps flexibility. The Pentagon must prepare for potential crises in multiple regions. Overextension historically weakens great powers. Containment without occupation prevents that trap. Let's simplify the logic. By supporting Ukraine but not sending troops, the U.S. weakens a geopolitical rival, strengthens NATO unity, tests modern warfare lessons, avoids nuclear escalation, preserves domestic political stability. That's strategic risk management. It's not emotional, it's calculated. The United States supports Ukraine strongly, but it won't send troops. Not because Ukraine doesn't matter, but because direct war between nuclear powers carries catastrophic risk. This is modern great power competition: indirect, calibrated, measured, support, without direct collision. The U.S. is trying to shape the outcome of the war, without becoming the war. And in geopolitics, sometimes the hardest strategy is restraint.